Now, following the second concept that's been mentioned when we said first and second in this document, which is sample of a legal English document, the second document is not finished. It was actually it consisted of two paragraphs, two sentences rather. The first sentence was this one, second, meaning the second item, and this is part of the second item. He says, in the event, he's just carrying on, in the event that my wife Clara May Ruth, now he is not going to put that in capital this time, because already he's mentioned it in capital earlier. Now, in the case of, or in the event of my wife, Clara May Ruth shall not survive me. Now, in the case of, she didn't survive me. If she survived me, she will be bequeathed, given. But if she doesn't survive me, shall not survive me, I direct my executors hereinafter named. Then I will direct other group of executors, which I will mention in this document hereinafter. Hereinafter from now onwards. Named. I will name them. To divide the said property, to divide the said property. The word property here, it means it is the land or whatever he owns, everything that is mentioned earlier. The said means what's been mentioned earlier. So, earlier in this document, the said property, between my daughters, comma, he's going to tell us the name of his daughters in uppercase. Why? Because they are the second party in the case of her, his wife shall not survive him. And they are Dorothy Ruth Sullivan and Julia Ruth Flanders. These are his daughters' names, the two daughters. As my said daughters may agree, that is on condition that my daughters agree to this. Or in the event they are unable to agree, that if they don't agree, to divide the said property between my said daughters as my executors herein named may in their resolution discretion determine. So this means that if they die or they don't want to actually, they don't agree to be executors of my will, then my executors herein named may, meaning my daughters in this document from now on, may in their absolute discretion, according to their discretion, it's absolute, there's no, it's final discretion, according to their discretion, determine. It is what they determine. The determination of my executors as to the relative values of such property for the purpose of dividing the same and in the making of such distribution shall be final, conclusive and binding upon all persons interested herein. So the determination of my executors, in other words, what my executors, my two daughters determine to be the value, relative value of such property. Such property, you don't say such a property. The A is dropped in legal documents, writing. Such property means such a property, this kind of property. This property itself. For the purpose of dividing the same, dividing the actual amounts. The same means that's being mentioned. The same is actually an expression which means dividing the same property, the values of these properties. And in the making of such distribution, and also if they want to distribute this kind of distribution they want to make, shall be final. See where the verb comes in? It's very delayed to the word determination. The determination of my executors, blah, 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 shall be final. Be. Shall be. This is where the verb is. Be. The main verb of this sentence, which starts with the determination of my executors, shall be final, conclusive, and binding. Final, conclusive, that's it. You conclude the whole episode. And binding means obligatory. Everybody should stick to it. Binding upon all persons, it is actually obligatory upon all the people involved, interested, herein, in this document. Herein means in this document. The word here means this document, as I said earlier. These are the elements that are mentioned. As you can see, we have introduced the word said, means the aforementioned. And may, it's not a possibility, it's as a possibility, but it's not a perhaps. In other words, it's up to them to decide, may agree or not agree. It's up to them. And we've noticed also the description or the adjective of my executors hereinafter named. Hereinafter named. My executors hereinafter named. You see, hereinafter named it belongs to the executor, qualifying the executors. The said property, said daughters means the aforementioned daughters, the ones I have mentioned. The word such is used instead of this property because we don't know what this means. They use the word such instead of this property and use the dividing the same values, the same amounts that are mentioned, the same property that he's mentioned earlier, and he counted them, books and glassware and china and silverware and so on. It is very clear that this whole paragraph is only 2 sentences. And it's clear only commas are used and the full stop. There is no question mark, there is no exclamation mark. We haven't seen in any of them that kind of thing. We've seen how complex the sentences are, and we've seen that in the second item here, which is I give and bequeath my wife Clara Ruth May Ruth if she shall survive me. But then he completes it and says, in the event that my wife Clara May Ruth shall not survive me, in the case she didn't survive. In other words, she dies before me. What happens? And here's the will. Then and then I die after her. Who's going to be the executors? Who's going to be the second party? The second party is going to be my daughters for the said property, for the all the property that I have mentioned earlier, the said property. And the said property involves, of course, my household furniture, automobiles with and paintings, works of art, books, china, glassware, silverware, linen and household furnishings and equipment of any kind, clothing, jewelry, article of personal wear and adornment and personal effects, but to exclude the other souvenirs and all the other letters and manuscripts and books. So that is what is the said property. Now, because the wife, if she's dead, he has to mention another second party instead of his wife, which are Dorothy Ruth Sullivan, which is one of his daughters, and Julia Ruth Flanders, also another daughter. And my said daughter means these daughters of mine, these 2 daughters of mine, may agree. They may agree, may not agree. If they don't agree, or in the event they are unable to agree, you see, he's always giving the options of agreeing or not agreeing. There's two options. Then to divide the said property, the property I mentioned earlier, between my said two daughters as executors hereinafter named. There will be because they are actually they are dividing the property between my daughters and whoever the executor is going to be, and these daughters of mine, who are the executors herein named, whether they agree or don't agree, they will divide them, and they are the ones who will decide in their absolute discretion, determine the division of the property between themselves. The determination of my executors as to the relative value of such property for the purpose of dividing the same and in the making of such distribution shall be final. Shall means must. It's an obligatory that it must be final. Their division, their distribution must be final. What they say is going to be final, conclusive, and binding by law upon all persons interested herein. For those persons interested herein is an adjective to the word all persons. Herein, that means in this document, and the persons who are interested in this document, the persons concerned in this document. We can see that the kind of features, again repeating themselves: executors, capital, names of second party in uppercase, long sentence, very complex sentence. The verb sometimes delayed, as in shall be the final at the very end line, the line before the last, penultimate line. So all of these elements, the word said, my said daughters, and said daughters, again, said property, and the use of such distribution and such property instead of this property and this distribution, and the expression the same, which is very typical legal expression used, meaning the same amount of property that I've mentioned earlier. So all of these altogether shows that this is kind of a document whose features we've already discussed earlier. But it's important in the line before last, which is final, conclusive, and binding. Final means this is they have the last word on the distribution and the dividing. Conclusive means it concludes everything. And binding means it is obligatory. It's a must upon all persons that are mentioned, and they are of interest in this document, like his wife and the two daughters as a second party.